and reform, and I would even say European powers could become colonizing powers because they have learned so much from Asia. Already in modern state, China was a much more centralized and modern states than the monarchies in Europe at that time. But it also shows us that our view of history is very erroneous. You see, when we speak about Christianity as part of European identity, we normally see it in a sense that, yes, European identity was very important. That's Middle Ages, that's Thomas Aquinas, the Gothic cathedrals, Baroque cathedrals, beautiful, like here in Ljubljani. That is the Christian heritage. But then you have the Enlightenment, you have tolerance, European values, which are all based on values of the Enlightenment, and this Enlightenment fought Christianity. And in order to be really democratic and free, we have to have an anti-Christian Europe, or a Europe free from the churches and free from the dark ages of religion. If we see the process, how Europe became enlightened, it was mostly through the missionaries, because in this, I would say, strange view of Europe, the missionaries are always the bad people against tolerance, who impose European religions on all the other people. But no, they learned from the other people, and they transmitted this knowledge to Europe, and Europe became enlightened because they, the missionaries, challenged the old ways of thinking in Europe. So secularism, because secular time, secular history, is which was produced through this Jesuit writing, that's the consequence of it, is a product also and mainly of the missionaries' reports to Europe and the transformation Europe underwent. So it's not an anti-Christian movement that is due also to Christianity. Which means we cannot speak about Europe without mentioning in some way Christianity. It does not mean that you have to be Christian to speak about it, because that's also one of the lessons we learned. But you cannot speak about Europe, European identity, also in the time of Enlightenment, without Christianity. So I would like to define two secularisms. One would be a secularism as the missionary transmitted it. A world where different religions have their place, which respect each other, and as Catholic Church we can fully accept that because we have what our Pope always tells us, the autonomy of reason. We have to use our reason to think. And this reason can be informed by religious knowledge, and is informed for us as Christians by religious knowledge, but it is autonomous. This is a good secularism. Bad secularism is where the Enlightenment values become intolerant towards Christianity. So they are exactly like the church they want to criticize. Very intolerant. And you know that tolerance was a word very important for Enlightenment, but was also very important for the missionaries, because they had tolerance in China. Emperor Kang He gave an edict of tolerance for the Christians, for the Catholics at that time. So we are on the same values. These values are also Christian values. And I think that now it was just a small consideration at the end of my talk, is that Europe now, we are going back to the old world order, you see. The rise of Europe was an exception. It was an exception due to industrial revolution, which happened first in Europe. And through this industrial revolution, I mean Europe and afterwards the United States, at least the Western world, Brodel in his Grammar of Civilization says that the Soviet Union at that time, now Russia, and the United States are the other Europe. So the same model of civilization as Europe, a little bit transformed. That this was the word exception. If you look to history on a global perspective, you always had in history two important places, which is India, China, and then the world in between, which are profited from that. And Europe was linked to these two big empires and all that trade and so on through the Arab traders, through Islam. We are going back to it. The big emerging economies are India and China, and the world in between. When Portugal, I mean Portugal also has, we have many Portuguese in Luxembourg, so when you speak with them, they have a very high national pride. The Portuguese did not discover Asia, as also the Spaniards did not discover America. It was already there before. And the Portuguese did not give a plus to the trade. They entered the Southeast Asian trade as it existed before. So the Portuguese were very wise people. They bought in India what they sold in China. They entered the trade as it existed. The British in the 16th century failed because they wanted to import European products. They wanted to sell wool products in India. It was not a big success, as you can imagine, because they have silk and many beautiful things, and in the sun it's not exactly English wool what is needed. But now we are coming to a world where again these two powers will determine the world in the future. And I think for many Europeans and Americans there's a little bit of worry there, because the values are slightly different. And Europe can only compete if Europe gets again more global, like in the past. If we learn from other societies. If we take many things in from other civilizations and cultures. And I must say, I'm worried for that for Europe. In Japan, most of the Japanese students, at least once during the 4 years they normally study at university, they do a trip to Europe or to the United States, of course also to Asia and so on. Rare are the Europeans who leave Europe for their studies. That is a big disadvantage for Europe in the future. So I can only tell you, please, you are young, you can move around. Go outside of Europe. Go to different cultures. Expose yourself to a different experience. And you will bring something new for Europe, the air Europe will need in the future to breathe. And the same is also true for the church. Because you see, the missionaries are not only people who go out of Europe to preach the gospel, as I said before. They also bring new values back to Europe and the culture they have lived in. And I think now also, when we speak about re-evangelization of Europe, that is something we have to include. And we are now perhaps at the time where missionaries from Asia and Africa will come to Europe. They are already here, and it's not a bad thing. I think that is very vital also for our church to breathe and to have a view, a really